It is Easter Monday, April 6th, 2012. A quiet and peaceful day in the small town of Griekwastad at the northern Cape of South Africa. On this day, the officers at the local police station have a quiet shift. Generally, not much happens here. Occasionally, there are robberies on the surrounding farms, but apart from that, crime remains rare in Griekwastad. However, that changes when the door of the police station swings open and 15-year-old Don Steenkamp rushes into the station covered in blood. He cries and repeats the same sentence over and over again. They are all dead. They are all dead. Griekwastad is the name of a small town in the province of North Cape in South Africa. The area is rather sparsely populated and most people work as farmers. From time to time, robberies occur on local farms, as there are usually several hundred meters between properties, making the remote farms easy targets. These attacks have become more frequent in recent years, and the Steenkamp family is concerned about it. The family is wealthy and well-respected in the area. Don Steenkamp, 44, and his wife Christelle, who is a year younger, also work as farmers. They own a lot of land and have been keeping sheep, cattle, and horses for several generations. Christelle also runs her own cafe where she sells homemade cakes and pastries. Her children Marcella and Don attend a boarding school 300 kilometers away. There are hardly any schools in the rural area of Noordkaap, so it is normal for the children to have to attend a school far away. However, since it is important to Christelle to see her children regularly, she drives the 300 kilometers to the boarding school every Friday to pick them up so that they can spend the weekend at home. Don and Christelle's upbringing is very strict, but at the same time loving. Although they have a lot of money, it is important to them not to spoil their children with material things. Therefore, they lead an unassuming life and expect their children to support them in their work on the farm. The Steenkamp family seems happy and content with their lives. They lack nothing and have everything they need. Until one day in April 2012, when everything suddenly changed. It is Easter Monday, April 6th, 2012. It seems to be a normal day. Until shortly before 7 p.m., when 15-year-old Don Steenkamp pulls up in a pickup truck at the local police station. Covered in blood, he gets out and runs into the station. Once there, he told the police about a brutal robbery. He had been outside in the shed when suddenly shots were fired. He was too frightened to go and see what had happened, so he hid in the shed and waited. When he went into the house after a while, he discovered his parents lying lifeless on the floor. His sister Marcella, who was a year younger, had also been shot but was still alive at first. However, she bled to death in his arms only a short time later. Don reports that he immediately ran to the car to go to the police. On the way, he found the perpetrator's discarded weapons at the courtyard gate, which he loaded into his car to hand over to the police. Don hands the weapons over to the police officers, and immediately afterwards, 2 officers set off for the Steenkamp farm. The family's neighbor, Joe Schultz, accompanies the officers, as he is responsible for security in the Farmers Association and is very familiar with robberies. When they arrive at the farm, Don, Christelle, and Marcella are lying lifeless in the house. They were shot. At first glance, the scene looks like that of an ordinary robbery. But when they examine the house more closely for clues, they begin to have doubts about the sequence of events that Don has described to them. Nothing was stolen or rummaged through in the Steenkamp house. This strongly contradicts a classic robbery. Some of the family's money was left lying around the house. All of their cars were still parked in front of the house, and not even the gun safe was touched, although the key was inside it. There is no evidence of a break-in, and the calibers used to shoot the victims match those of their own weapons. When they find a blood-stained, torn shirt in Don's room, they realize that they have to interrogate the 15-year-old again. Colonel Dick Duvall takes over the case. As a specialist in organized crime and murders, he's very familiar with such cases. When he arrives at the police station to interrogate Don, he is not there. He had been allowed to go to the restaurant across the street. When the policeman enters the restaurant to take Don to the station, he finds him surrounded by family friends, all trying to comfort him. They don't want the frightened Don to be questioned directly by the police. But since he is the only witness, there is no other choice, and Don has to follow the colonel to the station. He notices that the 15-year-old has washed himself in the restaurant and also thrown away his bloody shirt. On the one hand, this would have been important evidence. On the other hand, it is understandable that Don does not want the blood of his family on him for several hours. Don himself states that the blood disgusted him and that he therefore had to change his clothes. At the police station, evidence is secured from under his fingernails and swabs are taken from the remaining bloodstains on his body. He is then questioned. Don states that he went to the shed at around 6:30 p.m. His father and sister were watching TV and his mother was on the computer. Shortly after, he heard shots and hid in the shed for about 10 minutes. He then ran back to the house, where he found his dead parents and Marcella, who was seriously injured but still alive. She said that she loved him and died in his arms shortly afterwards. She clung to him so tightly that his t-shirt was torn. Don was so disgusted by her blood that he went to his room and changed his shirt. He reported that he then wanted to drive to the police, but suddenly heard gunshots again from the house, so he hid again briefly in the shed before fleeing in the truck. He stated that he stopped twice on the way. Once at the farm workers' house to warn them of the attackers in the house, and another time at the farm gate, where he found the perpetrators' weapons and took them with him. Investigators have serious doubts about Don's story, because at 6:34 p.m., Christelle sent another text message to her sister in which she wrote about upcoming vacation plans. So she could not have been killed until after that. Don would have had only 16 minutes to hide in the shed twice for several minutes, find his family dead, change his clothes, and stop twice during the drive to the police station. All of this would have been almost impossible in such a short period of time. Nevertheless, Don is released because they cannot prove anything against him for the time being, and he also does not seem to have a recognizable motive. Deon, Christelle, and Marcella are buried. While Don is comforted and supported by the rest of his family, the investigators are increasingly convinced that he himself murdered his family. And it doesn't take long before they come across evidence that supports their theory. The police find a chat history between Don and a friend of his. At the time of the chat, Don was not yet a suspect in the police investigation, which makes his messages even stranger.
Who do they suspect?
Just me.
Aren't there any other fingerprints?
No, just mine.
Aren't there any clues pointing to anyone else?
No, they won't find anyone else.
The investigators wonder how Don came to suspect that he was being suspected, and, above all, why he is so sure that they will not find any other clues. This is information that he can only have if he is the culprit. On August 21st, 4.5 months after the crime, Don is arrested and charged with the murder of his family. However, the judge releases him until the start of the trial because he considers it important that Don can continue going to school. The parents of the other children at Don's school are very disturbed by this decision, as they do not want their children to go to school with a potential murderer. Nevertheless, the judge upholds his decision until the trial. At the trial, the main reason for Don's indictment is explained once again. During Marcella's autopsy, injuries were found in her genital area. It is presumed that the 14-year-old was raped in the last 12 to 24 hours before her death. During this time, no strangers were on the farm. The public prosecutor therefore assumes that Don raped his own sister and that she wanted to tell her parents about it, so she saw no other way out than to shoot his entire family. Blood splatter from Marcella can be found on the bloody shirt found in Don's room. This means that Don must have been close when she died. The judge also doubts Don's testimony that his sister told him she loved him before she died. Marcella died a violent death and had defensive wounds on her hands and arms. This coincides with the fact that Don was found to have scratches on his neck and a bit of his own blood on his pants after the crime. Don and his lawyer deny all accusations. His lawyer says that Marcella could have sustained her genital injuries while riding at midday. Don claims that Marcella held onto his neck just before she died and that that's where the scratches came from. He admits that he had a fight with Marcella that afternoon, but it was a minor one and he can't even remember what it was about. He had his own blood on his trousers because he had a nosebleed that afternoon. The judge has little faith in Don's statements. He doubts that Don can no longer remember the argument, and there are also gaps in his other statements. The theory of the prosecution is that the family visited the church together in the morning and then had lunch. Marcella then went horse riding, with Don following her and raping her. It was probably not the first time, and Marcella swore that this time she would tell her parents. Of course, Don didn't want his parents to find out about it, and at the same time, he knew that he would inherit a lot of money when his parents died. He waited until evening and went to his parents' bedroom to get the revolver, with which he first shot his mother, seriously wounded Marcella, and finally killed his father, who ran towards him and tried to stop him. In the meantime, Marcella has managed to crawl out the back door into the garden. This is assumed because her blood was found in the garden. The autopsy results show that Marcella was hit over the head and shot in the face in the garden. But Marcella also survives this attack, seriously injured. A trail of blood from the telephone proves that Marcella managed to crawl back into the house and tried to call 911. She finally collapses. In the meantime, Don has fetched a second gun, with which he shoots his parents and sister in the head again. He then changes into a different shirt and drives to the police station. The fact that Marcella, unlike her parents, was not killed outright suggests a personal motive for the crime that has something to do with her. This would again support the theory of a sexual assault. The prosecution considers a robbery to be completely out of the question, since nothing was stolen and the Steenkamp's own weapons were used. No foreign fingerprints or tire tracks could be found, which means that the perpetrators would have had to be unarmed and on foot. It also makes no sense that Don allegedly heard gunshots in the house shortly before he fled in the truck. But the only two weapons used in the crime were found on the courtyard gate afterwards. For one thing, this is almost impossible in terms of time, and for another, there is no reason why the perpetrators should have left the weapons behind. The judge says, "Why did the stupid criminal throw the firearms away by the side of the road after the mission was accomplished? Would he have stuck his hands in the air and said he was sorry if confronted by the police or neighborhood watch?" It is also unclear why Don did not call the police from the farm and why he did not arm himself, even though the family owned many guns. The place where Marcella was shot and beaten in the garden is right next to the shed. If Don claims to have been hiding there, it is very strange that he apparently did not witness the attack. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Don pleads not guilty and sticks to his version of events. He presents the alleged course of events very confidently, almost arrogantly, and shows no emotions. He keeps changing minor details in his statement. Nevertheless, he is supported in his version by several family members who do not believe he is capable of such an act. A psychiatric report shows that Don is mentally healthy and not a sociopath or psychopath. Don is found to be fully criminally liable. At first, many residents still support him. But little by little, this changes. While he was previously considered quiet and reserved, fellow students perceived him as arrogant and overbearing after the act. A few days before the act, witnesses observed an argument between Don and his father. The argument was about Don wanting to drop out of school because he claimed to be bullied there. However, none of his classmates or teachers could confirm the bullying, which suggests that Don no longer considered school necessary because he knew how much he would inherit. Allegedly, 2 days after his family's death, Don also asked when and how much of his inheritance he would receive. On August 13, 2014, 2 days before Don Steenkamp's 18th birthday, the verdict is pronounced. He is found guilty. Since he was under 16 years of age at the time of the offense, he can be sentenced to a maximum of 20 years in prison, and that is ultimately the maximum he receives. When the verdict is announced, Don shows no emotion whatsoever. The judge says to him before pronouncing the verdict, "In 2 days you'll be a man, so be a man now." Don can be released at the earliest after 10 years in prison. Since he's still the sole heir of his family, he would have several million in the account when he is released. And that's the end of today's video. Even though Don has received his just punishment, that can't bring Dion, Christelle, and Marcella back. Their family will have to live with their cruel loss forever. If you like the video, please leave a like, comment, and/or subscribe. And feel free to activate the bell so you don't miss any videos, and the video is suggested to people who haven't yet subscribed to Insolito. Otherwise, there's not much more to say. I wish you a good morning, noon, or evening, or whenever you watch the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao guys.